In the heart of Canada's landscape, there lies a railway that connects not just cities, but the very history of our nation. But what happens when that connection is built on sweat, tears, and the harshest winters known to man? This is not a simple story of triumph. This is the untold tale of labor, sacrifice, and the cost of progress. Canada's story is often told through the lens of its great achievements, the milestones that shaped a nation. And while the Canadian Pacific Railway is undeniably one of the greatest triumphs of engineering in the world, there is a darker truth behind it. This is the untold story of the workers who paid the price, often with their lives, for a railway that promised progress but delivered exploitation. At the dawn of the 19th century, Canada's leaders had a vision to connect a vast and scattered nation with a single rail. A seemingly impossible task until they made a deal with the devil. Or rather, with the workers who would build it. They promised a nation united, but what they delivered was a division of labor so great, it cost lives. And the workers, they weren't part of the victory parade. The Canadian Pacific Railway was to unite the country, connecting the farthest reaches of the nation from the east to the west. But in the heat of ambition, something was lost along the way. The men who laid the rails, who dug the tunnels, who risked their lives day after day, they weren't celebrated in the story of Canada's progress. Instead, their sacrifices were swept under the rug, hidden behind the grandeur of the railway's success. Most of the workers who built this great railway were immigrants, many of them Irish, Chinese, and Indigenous people who worked tirelessly under unimaginable conditions. They were promised wages, safety, and fair treatment. But what they got were unsafe work conditions, diseases, and freezing winters. They worked through harsh winters, blistering sun, and rain that wouldn't stop. They worked day and night, sacrificing everything to build the railway that would change the country forever. The story of these workers isn't just one of physical hardship. It's a story of betrayal. These men came to Canada seeking a better life, hoping for a future where their children could thrive. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a cycle of back-breaking labor for meager pay and no recognition. Many were left to die alone in the wilderness, their bodies never recovered, their sacrifices forgotten. The promise of a better life, a life built on the tracks they laid, was often nothing more than an illusion. As the railway project expanded, so did the demand for workers. But the men who signed up weren't just workers, they were dreamers. Immigrants, looking for a chance to create a future for themselves and their families. The Canadian government and the railroad companies promised them a brighter future, but instead, they received the harsh reality of grueling work, unbearable conditions, and little hope for a better life. Work didn't end with the setting of the sun. The hammer striking the spike wasn't a sound of victory. It was a signal that the labor would never stop. These men worked until their bodies gave out, and still, the tracks went on. There was no pause, no end of shift, just endless toil, until the earth itself seemed to cry out in exhaustion. Their names faded, their memories erased, but their work, that's still here. The tracks still run, the trains still roll, but what did they get for it? Nothing. They gave everything, and got nothing in return. One of the most chilling aspects of this story is the stark contrast between the success of the railway and the suffering of the workers. The railway companies made billions, and the Canadian economy boomed. But the workers, they were left with nothing. No recognition, no pensions, and in many cases, no place in history. Their families mourned their deaths, but the nation moved forward, as if their sacrifices never mattered. The railway companies made deals with the Canadian government, and politicians made promises. But what about the workers who actually built this country? They were betrayed. They were told they would be rewarded, that their work would be honored. But as the money poured in, the workers' cries were drowned out. The legacy they left wasn't one of triumph, but one of silence. Their reward, a thank you note buried in the archives, and a grave that was never marked. Despite the unimaginable conditions, the workers kept going. They had no choice. The railway was their only hope for a better future. They worked with no guarantees, no safety nets, and no promises. And when the job was finished, they were left behind, just as they had been before. The country had its railway, but the workers had nothing but their memories, fading away like the tracks themselves. Today, the Canadian Pacific Railway is celebrated as one of the nation's greatest achievements. Monuments stand in its honor, but do they really honor the right people? The people who gave their blood, sweat, and tears for this nation are still waiting for their recognition. The tracks may connect cities, but they also divide the past from the present. The workers' legacy is a side note in the story of Canada's triumph. But what happens when we stop erasing their names and start telling their story? Even today, the descendants of these workers continue to fight for recognition. They continue to ask, what did we build this for if not to be remembered? And the truth is, we've all forgotten the people who worked tirelessly to make this country what it is today. Forgotten the labor that made this nation possible. The echoes of their struggles aren't just in the past, they still reverberate, silent but insistent, in the lives of their children, grandchildren, and generations yet to come. What does it mean when we erase the people who built this country from our history? What does it say about us as a nation when we forget the workers, the builders, the laborers who laid down the foundation for everything we take for granted today? The echoes of their struggles are still there, haunting us, asking us to remember, to acknowledge, and to honor them for the sacrifices they made. Canada's railway is a legacy built on both triumph and tragedy. But can we really call it a triumph if we forget the people who paid for it? Can we move forward while erasing their sacrifices from history? A nation that forgets the sacrifices made for it cannot truly move forward. It must first acknowledge the debt it owes. And that debt isn't just monetary, it's a debt of recognition, of respect, and of memory. As we look back on the history of Canada's railway, it's important to ask ourselves, who does this legacy truly belong to? Does it belong to the politicians and the railroad companies who profited from it? Or does it belong to the workers, the men who toiled for years, their bodies broken, their names forgotten? We cannot continue to celebrate this achievement without acknowledging the price that was paid for it. What's left for the workers who built this country with their hands? For the workers who laid down the tracks but never got the credit? What happens when we erase the workers from the story and only celebrate the triumphs? It's time to rewrite history. It's time to acknowledge the workers who built this country and give them the recognition they deserve. Moving forward means learning from the past and honoring the contributions of those who were left out of the story. What happened to the workers who built the railway? Where are their stories? Where are their monuments? These are questions we must ask if we truly want to move forward as a nation. We must learn from the past, and we must honor the people who helped create the country we live in today. Their story matters. Their sacrifices matter, and it's time we told it. If this story opened your eyes to the untold history of Canada's railway, don't let it fade into the past. Subscribe to Maple Myths and help us make sure the voices of the forgotten are heard. Let's honor those who built this country and finally tell their story. Subscribe now and join us in keeping the truth alive.